Hello and welcome to the 39th video of the Project Sovereign series. In this video, I'll set up the studio to create the textures for the ship. This is a really helpful first step in the texture creation process, so let's get started. So today I'm going to share with you how I build my texture studio. So this is my method for creating the textures that will be applied to the ship mesh. And I want to say that I learned this from legendary Trek modeler DJ Curtis. He showed this technique in the forums back in the day. And I'm probably going to butcher it, but I've probably modified it to suit my needs, but it's really good workflow. And one of the great advantages of this is that these are made in Max, which means that I get to use my model itself as a reference. If I tried to use an image like this, it probably wouldn't line up properly, because if you've been following this build, I had to make several changes due to the fact that this isn't really accurate. So I get to use the shape itself as a reference. That also means that if I need to, I can take geometry from this and use it as a texture itself. So just imagine, I'm not going to do it, but just imagine if I were to select each one of these polygons and create a new shape out of this. Well, this would be a two-dimensional shape, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in just a moment. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to save this scene as Sovereign Texture Studio, because I want this to be a completely different file from the build. So I can do whatever I want to this file. It's not going to mess up the main build. So I've already saved it as such, so I'm going to cancel, but that is what I want to do. The next thing I want to do is I want to select everything and right click and go to Object Properties. And I want to make this not renderable, because we're going to be using the scanline renderer for this, and everything here is rendered in Corona. So it just makes sense to make it unrenderable. I'm just going to build everything, or I can select whatever geometry I want from the ship itself, apply a standard material, and I'll be able to render it out. But I don't want anything showing up in this from the original build that I'm doing, so I'm just going to click OK. All right. Now that that's taken care of, the next thing I need to do is set up my render engine. So I'm going to go to Render Setup and choose Scanline. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want a nice flat image. I don't want any shading. I don't want any shadows, any ray tracing. I just want nice and flat, because these are going to be graphics, right, that are going to be applied to the ship. So I'm going to select Scanline Renderer. The next thing I want to do is I want to select my render output size. And right now I'm in 1920 by 1080, but that's not going to do. I need to think to myself, what size textures do I want on this ship? And the answer to that is going to be 4K. So 4096 by 4096. And for stuff like this, I always use powers of 2, just because I'm used to modding video games, and video games like powers of 2 in their texture maps. Got to set the ratio. Keep forgetting it does that automatically if you're an HD TV. So there we go, 4096 by 4096. That's what I want to do. So this is all set up. Now it's time to light the scene, and that's going to be done very simply with a skylight, because I want, again, nice even lighting, no shadows, no nothing like that, just nice even flat lighting. So I'll just bring that into my scene. Standard skylight. And just make sure all my settings are there. It's on with a multiplier of 1. It's going to use the sky color, which is white. So this should be fine. I don't want it to cast shadows. I'm going to leave this blank. And I can just move it away so it's not in my way. This could be anywhere in the scene. It's a global setting. This is just telling Max that, yes, indeed, the skylight is in here. Now what I want to do is I want to set the background color. And this is more important than you might think. I'm going to be saving these as transparent, because I'm going to be using Photoshop, and I want to do layers, but I need to think about what background color I want, because if I'm rendering something very light and it's a dark background, there might leave outlines. So I know that these textures are going to be very light because it's the Sovereign, it's a light ship. So I'm just going to choose white as my background color. This will not light the scene, because it's in Scanline. I can choose whatever color I want. It's not going to light the scene. That's all up to the skylight. So I'm just going to click OK. And I'm going to clear my HDR, because I don't need that at all. The next thing I want to do is actually set up my camera. Now this needs to be a specific type of camera, so I'm just going to click my camera icon, and I want it to be a target camera, not a physical camera, but target camera, and you'll see why in just a bit. So I'll just drag it into the scene. Pretty arbitrary wherever it is. I can select the target, and I want it to be X0, Y0, and I'll grab the camera itself, move it up, and this will be X0, Y0 as well. So what I can do, because this is a targeted camera, is when I get into my camera view, I can actually set it to orthographic projection, which it already is. You want to make sure that this is checked because you want everything to be completely flat. So if I uncheck it, you see how it becomes distorted? We want everything to be completely flat, so orthographic projection. Also, what we can do is we can change the target distance, and now we can get more or less of the ship into view. This is going to be important, as you'll see in just a moment. So what I can do is just press P. You always want to press P before you start moving around the viewport, otherwise you'll move the camera around. I want to select the ship itself, just drag over and select the ship. And I want to group it. This will just make it easier to move around and handle. Now I want to think to myself, I'm going to be drawing stuff on the ground plane. So what I need to do is I want to drop my ship below it. So everything that I draw is going to appear on top of it. It's going to be much more convenient. And when I get back to my camera view, doesn't matter, right? Because we're in orthographic projection. So I'm just going to deselect this. And what I want to do now is press Shift F. And this brings up my save frame. Remember 4096 by 4096. So this is a nice square. And this is going to be the size of my texture. So I could just select my camera, go into my camera view, and I just want to make sure that the saucer fills up as much of the space as I can. So I'm going to bring my target distance closer, then I can move my ship, and just kind of play with this. Until I get the top of the saucer into view. Now, you're going to notice that there's a lot of wasted space here, and that's okay because we can always use it for other elements. We don't want to let any of this space go to waste, right? That's just, well, wasteful. So we just want to make sure that everything is nice and centered. Just keep doing this. Okay, I think that should be good. And now what I can do is I can start drawing. I can actually start making the texture. So I'm going to create, there's a line that goes from here to here. That's painted on, it's not actually modeled. So this is going to be an element of our texture. So what I can do is I can create a line like so. And I can give it a Bezier curve just like we're modeling. Might need to zoom in just to get a handle on this. And you can always zoom in on things because you can just go back to your camera view later. Just keep adjusting it. All right. Now, of course, this isn't going to render because it's just a line, so we have to actually give it zoom in a little bit. Now we can give it some dimension. And we can give it fewer sides. It doesn't matter because it's going to be flat, as you will see. And the final step is going to give it a material. So I can actually erase all of these and just create a standard. And just give it a gray color. a bit darker. Assign material to selection. Okay, now I'm going to render it out. And sometimes you'll see this UVW map error message show up. Just don't display this message and continue. And there you have it. See, that's our line right there. So I'm going to save this. I want to save it in my textures folder right here in Scene Assets. So textures, let's call this saucer top. And I want to save it as a PNG. And I want to make sure that alpha channel is checked because it's going to be transparent. So, okay. All right, so now let's move over to Photoshop. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open saucer top PNG. And here it is. You can just barely see it, but if I create another layer, move it under, fill it with white, and there you go. So this is our image right here. It's on a completely transparent layer, so we can do whatever we want underneath and above it. And this is going to be extremely important because there are going to be a lot of layers going on. And each one needs to be independent so they can be worked on independently. I'm not going to go into the whole detail of how this is going to work in this video, but I will in others because I want to show you the texturing process. So I hope that you find this useful. It's a very powerful way of creating textures using 3ds Max and importing them into Photoshop so you can work on them in Photoshop and finally export them back into Max and map them back onto the ship. It's a complicated and time-consuming process, so I'm probably not going to show that much of the texturing. I'll show you at least like one texture sheet and probably some other things like maybe some unwrapping and if anything else interesting happens. But this process is going to be really just kind of by the book, very rote and not terribly exciting to watch. So try incorporating this on your ship models. I think you're going to find this a really useful technique. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon.